All right. So we're ready to go. And it looks like it starts with Kaitlyn. Oh, I saw this, but I didn't read in detail the fan vibrations.
Oh, right. So here's a new idea for extracting data off machines. It's possible to control when fans go on and off. And so you can think of it really simply as if you send a command to turn on the fan really loudly, you could create Morse code. So you send it on to make it loudly, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. However, most fans in computer chassis run on PWM, pulse width modulation, which means you can actually have much faster on and offs going on. And maybe I can get an example out here.
Really?
I can't, unfortunately. No, it's not.
My first thought is just from the middle of the blade, you could maybe have 1 bit every 10 seconds. Can you get more than that?
Absolutely. So actually, I think maybe I can pick this up. I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear that? That's because I'm running a 50% PWM signal through this. Now it's 25%.
Can you hold your speaker to it closer or something?
Let me see if I can do that. Does that come out?
I'm not hearing it.
Okay. But absolutely, you can make the fan vibrate at various different frequencies, highly controlled, using these PWM signals. And then you can pick up the vibrations through the desk.
It sounds like using a dial-up modem, really.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like using a dial-up modem. It's just another way. Researchers are finding clever new ways to extract data that are from computers that are air-gapped. Turning on the monitor brightness up and down. Turning on the keyboard lights. And another way is just to use the fans themselves. And fans are, you almost never notice them most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a nice way to get some data out.
Yeah, I remember one that I saw, but I never seen become for sale commonly, was where you put LED lights and then you would use that for your internet. And they said you get like 10 megabits per second just from flickering the lights.
Yeah, Li-Fi, I think is what they call it.
Yeah, but I haven't seen anybody selling it or using it much.
No. Although 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi will be available to the public soon.
6 gigahertz? Isn't that 802.11 AC or AD? Or is it something?
It's totally new. So the problem with the current frequencies is 2.4 is 2 U's. And of course, it's also used by microwave ovens, and it doesn't go through, it just has a lot of interference.
I thought 6 was illegal by the FCC. Did they open it up?
They're opening it up soon. So the problem with 5 is much better, but it's also the frequency that radar uses. So if a good little a denial of service attack for Wi-Fi, or at least Wi-Fi 5 gigahertz, is to send out radar waves nearby. And Wi-Fi devices, by design, have to shut down if they see radar nearby. So 6 gigahertz would be finally kind of a dedicated Wi-Fi frequency that we could all use. And
wow,
yeah, it'll be big stuff.
It does.
So time to buy whole new equipment again.
All new equipment. Yeah, I just bought,
new phones. Yep, time to get shopping.
Yeah, I just bought a $300 router because working at home. So in a few years from now, I just have to pony up and buy another $300 router.
Well, I think this is what I keep trying to tell my sister. She keeps using old stuff, and I keep saying, you got to think of computers like fresh fruit. I mean, she says, oh, no, it's still working. I'm going to use it until it doesn't work. And I'm like, no, you can't think that.
I'm really bad on that. I understand it.
External dial-up modem. And you could even open up google.com. And then she said, here's this voice coming from the kitchen. Don't tell me I have to upgrade. That's what my ISP keeps saying. And they're just trying to rip me off. And I'm like, oh, no. I finally learned that what I have to do is buy her a new computer and give it to her, because she will never buy a computer. And then I give the old one to a student. That's the only way anything ever moves forward.
Right, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it in their minds.
Right. In principle, you can keep using that apple with the handle on top, and she was. And I'm like, oh, please.
Oh, wait, are you talking about those big iMacs with the?
Yes.
With the? Oh, I want to keep using one of those.
It's funny because there's an emerging market in vintage tech. Those old machines, people like buy them up now because they. And then it's almost like a user challenge. Like to see what all they can do on those machines.
Right. How many modern things can you do on the vintage tech? Yeah.
Well, there's a bunch of people still using Amigas, but anyway, but
Amiga will never die. I mean, it was the perfect computer, and there's no reason to ever upgrade that one.
Well, I can't understand people like that. I'm too busy teaching COBOL. Anyway.
I understand it on a fundamental level. Tech's a commodity. It goes bad.
Yeah.
But I'm also the person that's still using an iPhone 6 because it's got a headphone jack. So. Yeah.
Well, anyway, this I thought was bloody awesome in the New York Times. So the Russians have a nuclear submarine, which was top secret, and it goes to 20,000 feet, which is far deeper than any American submarine goes. And it's built as a bunch of spheres with little tubes to handle the pressure. And no one would ever have found out except it caught on fire and killed the sailors, and they lost it, and they had to have people rescue it. But this crazy thing is straight out of Star Trek. I mean, titanium spheres and a bunch of poor soldiers crawling in here, and they see there's only like 2 feet of clearance, and you're in the room with all the batteries, and then it catches fire, and all they can do is close that little thing and trap you in there so they don't kill everyone. And so anyway, they finally lost this thing. And I was reading this, and they say the whole point of this is to go down and cut undersea cables to freeze communications, because all the international communications, of course, go through this network of subterranean cables, which I think we got a picture of down here someplace. Yeah, these are the cables that carry all the traffic. So they are sneaking down there, cutting the cables for military reasons and hiding, and nobody can find them because it's all silent. So they say it's just like Red October all over again. And I was feeling kind of bad, thinking the U.S. is way behind here. And then they mentioned, of course, the United States just uses drones. They wouldn't send any people down there. Are you crazy? That made me feel a little better. But anyway, it's very interesting tech.
Huh.
That's insane. It makes you wonder if that has anything to do with the recent stories about huge swaths of internet traffic getting routed through Russia.
Oh, yeah, that kind of stuff. And there were all these cable cuts when the Middle East had turmoil like 2012. It is a common attack and a devastating one. I mean, you can still communicate through satellites or something, but the main bandwidth is hosed when you cut those cables.
Right.
Anyway, I thought that was good, clean fun.
That's wild.
And this one with the 4-0 days. Well, I really like this one.
Yeah, this was a big story this week. I think it's going to have some pretty far-reaching ramifications too, because this affects a lot of companies, and they're not small vulns either. I should say they're not low-severity vulns. They're kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I like this. The default password. Like again, Cisco had like 7 of these last year, hard-coded default passwords. And
in a row.
When we were in China,
happening. It just keeps happening.
There was a guy that said everyone quit doing that years ago, and one of the people said, "Oh no, they didn't. I worked at my company." A lot of people are still doing this stuff.
Yeah,
it's awful.
It's insane. It's insane, and it just goes to show that how as much education as we do in the industry, and their agencies and enterprises are implementing increasing amounts of oversight over the processes, and we still have stuff like this.
Well, but I'm thinking about our politics and our college and the health system. 90% of everything wrong is because somebody's doing something ridiculously stupid that they know they shouldn't be doing. And it's just a really hard thing to have governance where you stop people from driving their car too fast and smoking and things like that. It's not that you don't know what to do. You don't know how to make people do it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time there's just not enough resource to, places just don't have enough resource to make sure that everything's up to snuff.
You have to be organized. You have to actually have a process of reviewing stuff and making sure it's all up to a reasonable standard. Basically, compliance is what you need. I'm an increasing fan of compliance. Just being organized would make a huge difference, even though it's kind of annoying.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, there's Metasploit after this and everything.
Yeah.
So be pretty interesting. I think we'll be getting some more news stories out of this in the future.
Yeah, I would like to think that if I owned a company, nothing would ever ship with a default hard-coded password. That doesn't seem like that would be asking too much, anyway. All right, and then we got, the Android store.
Yeah, the Android store.
One of the third-party ones, not the big
Yes,
one.
right. It's a third-party one that is mostly European and Asian, with their headquarters in Portugal. They got quite the breach, and it was people spotted that the passwords were not salted at all.
Oh.
Yeah, the export was a PostgreSQL export file.
Yeah, and I wonder what hashing algorithm they used.
I think it was SHA-1.
Okay, but without any salt, that's not going to do much good. Yeah, that'd be good, clean fun. I used to gather those and crack them. I haven't done it for a while. But I wonder why European people use these third-party stores. I know China has to because they block Google. But I don't know why, if you were in Europe, you wouldn't just use the Google store.
Who knows? But 2.2 million users in 60 days.
Yeah.
Was their other breach in 2018. So this is not the first time they've had a leak like this.
This is why you got to use a password manager, because the people at the other end are just throwing your password on the ground.
Yep.
Even if you're careful. All right. And then we got right to repair. This is pretty important.
It is important. So let's do a little backstory here. So as everyone knows, Apple has been putting out these iPhones and iDevices that are pretty difficult to do basic maintenance. Like if you want to replace a battery in your iPhone, you have to, well, one, it like voids your warranty, which is ridiculous. And then you have to heat up some glue on the outside, pry open your phone, disassemble the battery, and then try to put it all back together. And it's really hard. And Apple's saying, no, you can't do this. You're going to wreck your phone. You got to send it to us. And people are saying, no, we should have the right to change our own iPhone batteries. And this kind of went quietly in the background for a while. But other companies started noticing what Apple was doing and other tech companies were doing and applied it to their own industries, in particular, the farming industry. So you have farming manufacturing companies like John Deere who are creating tractors and stuff and saying, oh no, we're just going to follow kind of Apple's example and the tech industry's example, where if you want to get this repaired, you go through us. Don't do it yourself. You don't have a right to, do it yourself. You got to go through us. Now, repairing your own equipment in farming is very important and very traditional too. This has been going on, for thousands of years. You buy a piece of equipment, you repair it. That's how farms operate. And so since this is now affecting farmers, the issue has really blown up. And so recently the Australian government consumer watchdog, the ACCC, is looking into this matter of not being able to repair farm equipment. And if there are legal rulings that say, hey, you cannot make farm equipment that you're not supposed to repair, this will resonate throughout the entire tech industry, and Apple and other tech companies will start to have to make repair manuals available to the public so that we can all repair our own things.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I've heard a lot of it from the phone hackers and stuff.
One of the problems too is Apple really stepped it up by putting the T2 chips in Macs over the past couple of years, which means that basically when a computer reaches end of life, which could be like 2 years for enterprise machines, it's e-waste. There's no fixing it. And you can't repair, you can't replace components. You can't reset, you can't reset accounts that are still locked.
What devices have that?
Environmentally bad.
Is that in my Mac?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Look into the
T2. You're using old Macs. Your Mac hits the end of life and then it stops working?
Well, you can't, what I'm saying is you can't repair it with any third-party parts. Like you can't, for example, just put in a new display.
Okay.
your display gets cracked because the chip runs software checks and will brick your machine.
So you can still go to like an authorized repair store.
Only authorized, only the authorized repair centers have the software to use it. And John Deere's done the same thing, which is a major problem for farmers, especially because a lot of these people are out in the hinterlands. For them to load up a massive combine onto a trailer and then tow it 200 or 300 miles to a service center is just wildly impractical and expensive.
Okay, I'm just distracted by what in the world this is.
Hmm.
Looks like a Mac, but my Mac is not there anyway.
And this, Kaitlyn, I think this is a great story because it really affects all of us in terms of, these are the people that are producing our food supply. And if they're getting hosed on a fundamental level, it's going to be a problem for everybody.
Right. One of the things that we're finding out is that a lot of technologies that have been marketed as, just luxuries are really essential. Like the internet, for example, like that should be a base utility that we need to really make sure that there are protections, because right now, telephone is protected as a utility. Power lines are protected. You have, gas and things that are protected too, but the internet is not. And so laws need to come up to speed with the 21st century. Maybe at one point in the past, it was unfeasible to expect people to have labs in their homes to be able to fix electronics. But I can speak from personal experience that right behind me, there's a lab right there that I could use to fix iPhones. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because of this story. I was reading a year or two ago that there's been a huge resurgence in old international harvester farming equipment and stuff like that, because you can actually still repair it, which I thought was interesting. In some ways a 40-year-old tractor is now worth a lot more money in secondhand sales just because you can fix it.
And then there's the genetically engineered seeds that you can't copy. Farming, this gets closely related to software patents and DRM for music. Just, there's a lot of legal and technical issues about ownership of things that are not simple material objects anymore.
You guys remember that CompTIA was fighting this too, right?
No, I didn't know that.
They had, for a while, they were lobbying the right to repair stuff. That basically having an A+ wasn't, you couldn't repair stuff.
Oh, and they felt like it was devaluing their certificate?
They were basically shooting themselves in the foot, and everybody screamed against them. And on February 21st of this year, they publicly stepped back from the
they were trying to prevent right to repair.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, wait, you're training people to fix stuff, but you also don't want people to have the right to fix stuff?
That's hilarious.
I think what they want, I mean, I don't know much about this, but if I were a company that had to certify people in repairing, I'd be very scared of people learning how to do things at home and devaluing my certificate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I would think the number of people that actually want to repair their own stuff is like below 5% and always will be. You have most people just want to take it to the shop. So you're not going to mess up your business by letting people hack stuff. You're just going to have a sort of side enthusiast market like the Apple jailbreak market that is harmless and interesting.
Except for the fact that a lot of these shops that repair devices are not licensed by like Apple or by John Deere.
Well, yeah, because to get licenses is ridiculous. I remember reading all the steps you have to do in order to get the blessing.
Yeah.
So if you want to start up a small little repair shop, good luck with that if you don't have a right to repair.
Yeah.
Well, but I don't think there's any reason to resist it. For example, Apple has totally got this solved. They have a luxury brand, and people will pay extra to go to the official repair center. 90% of the users would never think of anything else. They don't care about cost. It's a luxury item. They've got a winning brand there.
Right, but what do you do about a small mom and pop Apple repair station that Apple says, hey, you're not licensed. You can't repair Apple stuff here. Should Apple have the right to shut them down?
Give those shops the proprietary tools they need to, make the repairs usable.
Yeah, I would just let them go. But, of course, if you go too far, you turn into IBM. And IBM went broke, just letting everybody clone their computers. So there are, I guess, just two sides there. Well, anyway, then we've got this one, which I thought was very interesting. And the thing about this is it makes me think I really need to write new projects for the pen testing classes, because these tools that are being used these days are not the ones we're covering. I guess they should be. So this guy set up a honeypot, and he watches how people hacked it. So he ran a trick bot sample, which made one machine a bot, and then they used a series of tools to take over his other machines. So he got trick bot. They then used Cobalt Strike, which is big. I don't know if there's a free version. I haven't used it, but that's what the bad guys really used. Then they went to his domain controller. Then they ran Bloodhound to find the attack paths. Then they used PowerView and Network Scanner to map to the domain controller. And here's the commands they ran. This is a very nice list. This is a project I should really write up and have one of the pen testing projects where you duplicate this and practice using all these tools. Using these PowerShell attacks and everything, then you set up RDP. So it's like step by step what we should be teaching our students and what we should be practicing. So then it turns off Defender, then it runs for Yook malware. And I'm very impressed. This is a very good write-up, and we should really make sure that all our students know how to go through this, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I know you're doing the OSCP. Are they covering all this new stuff, or is it kind of out of date?
Actually, it's very up to date. They, like I said, I mentioned to Liz earlier that they've recently added 500 more pages. They doubled the size. Yeah. All the stuff's up to date. They don't cover everything though. Basically, what you get in a basic, Kali install. But I mean, there's a lot of tools that are mentioned in the OSCP that have not been mentioned in your class. One of them right now that I'm working on is what's called Shelter, SHELLTER, which puts shellcode into legit binaries. So if you wanted to create a version of PuTTY that would get a reverse shell back to you, you can run Shelter, throw in your shellcode into that, and then when this person runs a Trojan version of PuTTY, you get a reverse shell without having to do any.
I do that manually, but an automated tool would be nicer, of course.
Yeah. So there's an automated tool to do that. I don't think it has all these tools though.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm glad to see it. And then Agent Czeslaw.
Yeah, so this is interesting on multiple levels. The Agent Czeslaw malware has been it's been described as malware as a service. Like they have a support desk and everything else for this botnet, which I think is just amazing. But they've been successfully targeting the oil and gas industry, and it's a really kind of an ingenious attack. It's a good time to be doing that because the oil industry is at the point where they're reaching, they don't have any more capacity to store oil because the global consumption has been just drastically reduced due to the coronavirus. I mean, so they're basically at the point where once May comes around, they're going to be at capacity all over. There's going to be no more place to store the oil. So these attackers, this is just so ingenious. They've been targeting these companies with basically like they masquerade as contractors, asking for requests for quotes, and also I think the other approach it has to do with like supply chain management and stuff like that. So, there are all these companies and entities that are desperately looking to offload supply. So it's super effective.
Yeah. Classic spear phishing.
And yeah. And it's effective too. They are essentially getting all these companies to, once they start engaging, the payload gets dropped. They're part of the, they're hit by the botnet, and lots of sensitive info's extracted then. So I just thought this was a pretty interesting story.
Oh yeah.
One of the things that's really been interesting to see develop because of the COVID-19 crisis is the fact that so many things we thought were impossible are absolutely possible given the right motivation. So we've seen things like the oil and gas usage drastically drop. We've been trying to reduce oil usage and clean up the environment for decades now, and everyone says, oh no, we can't do that, we can't do that. But apparently we can. The same thing with like working from home. Everyone says, oh, you got to go to work, it's essentially go to work, and then suddenly you have to work from home, and then, oh well, we could have done that the whole time. It's so many, it's opening up what we're truly capable of.
I think there are two really good things that could come out of this. One is we will certainly get socialized medicine. And the second thing is we can maybe start doing something about climate change, because right. It's the same kind of thing. The right wants to pretend it's not happening. The left can prove it's happening. And we might have enough momentum in the backlash from Trump to actually do something about it. Anyway.
I'm surprised, like the socialized medicine thing seemed like a no-brainer to me. But there's still people pushing back against that, which just blows my mind. I don't get it at all.
Until it happens to them, then they'll want it.
No, I understand it increasingly. I've been studying the right for years. The rich people want to just keep all the money and grind the people underneath as serfs, and they have paid efficient propaganda systems to keep them in line. There's a book about this called The Trouble with Kansas that explains it from a decade or more ago. Kansas used to be liberal, and so the right moved in and made them right-wing. And they did it by having a carefully planned disinformation campaign to appeal to people's emotions. And what they convinced them is, what you need to do is quit having unions and pay raises and instead focus on getting rid of the gay people in California that are going to corrupt your children and ruin them. So you will save your children by supporting right-wing policies. And this is what you do. You find a wedge issue. With Trump, it's always racism. Like, he's closed the borders to distract you from the fact that he did everything wrong about coronavirus, and it works because you focus them on the scary enemy to blame everything on, and then they don't really care what you do anymore.
Well, I think that with everybody losing their jobs right now and their insurance, we'd be already making moves on getting some kind of public health option in place, but it doesn't seem like that's happening.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that's happening.
I think it will happen. I think the pressure for that will be undeniable. I think even the Republicans want that. So I think it's going to increase, but we'll see. It's really hard to call the shots in politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember that behind all the propaganda, behind all the wedge issues that are pushed out that get people really upset and arguing, most Americans agree on 99% of the stuff. We have those small groups of people out there that are saying, you got to reopen the states, no to social distancing. But if you ask people, Democrat or Republican, 90% of the people will agree, yeah, we need to social distance right now. And I think Sam's right. I think if you ask people right now whether or not it's a good idea to have our medical system tied to holding a job.
You're getting some kind of echo, Kaitlyn.
Yeah.
When you talk, there's like a distorted version of your voice a second behind. It comes and goes.
Yeah, I think
I hear her fine.
Yeah, I think someone else's mic is picking me up.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you're right, Sam.
Well, I don't think it's 90%. I mean, there's 40% approval of Trump. I think there's a hardcore of people that watch Fox News and believe everything it says and are convinced that everything scientists and intellectuals say is a conspiracy to lie to them. And I think that is a serious problem. I think it's always been there. Just like the hardcore bigots from the South. I think there's a large group of people in America that really are stubbornly resisting all progress. And you can only shove them around by brute force by outvoting them. But I could be wrong. Anyway, so then we got a breach here, Beaumont. I don't know what Beaumont is. What's Beaumont? Irvin. Ain't this one of yours? Yeah.
He's muted.
He's frozen or something?
Muted.
There you go.
Oh, he's muted.
Yeah, it's a hospital.
Yeah. Oh.
They got hit with a phishing campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And they got people's PII out.
They didn't ransomware them? That seems to be what people love to do these days.
It seems to not be ransomware. It seems to just be phishing. And as a help to the people who got their information out, they gave them free credit monitoring.
And I've heard that credit monitoring is totally worthless.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't ransomware them because I also don't think you get much money from these stolen accounts anymore.
I think they still have some value. I mean, some of these were dead people, so good luck with that.
Yeah. The medical data is one of the higher value things to steal.
Yeah, but they were able to do it without ransomware. It was just a successful phishing campaign.
It probably just installed a rat. It'd be good to get through the kill chain. This is another thing missing from my classes is the attack framework.
Yeah.
Just sort of mind-boggling with like 100 categories, but we really have to get good at using it.
Yeah.
I have to find some way to make that palatable and not just mind-boggling.
I've been trying to find a game or an activity that implements it, and I thought I found one with Vector, and I don't think so. I'm still, my search is still on.
But
I agree with you, Sam. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. All right.
We talked about it in class, but you know, I'm in the same boat with you guys where I'm having a hard time finding a good practical hands-on application for them to learn to use it.
Yeah. And so Facebook is actually going to stop publishing something bad. That'll be the day.
Yeah, no. So some good news about Facebook for a change. They want to start policing the types of organized activities that might violate social distancing laws. And one would assume this also includes the protests against social distancing.
Like the ones pushed by the president directly. So how can you resist that?
Well, you know, it is weird because, can the president say things that encourage people to do things that are against the law? I mean,
yes, obviously.
Yes, he can. But does that mean that Facebook needs to, condone it? I don't think so.
You have to. It's news. You can't ignore what the president says.
Well, you can't ignore it, but the laws are pretty clear. So the president also says, shelter in place. So the president is kind of all over the place on this, as one would expect from Trump.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
Yeah, Facebook tell us something we don't know.
Yeah. Facebook. Yeah, Facebook is trying to cut down on these groups, organizing and violating social distancing laws, which I'm sure there are people out there that are going to complain about freedom of speech and blah, blah, blah. But, I think this is a good thing. You need to keep people safe, and social media companies really need to be aware of any misinformation or any dangerous posts that could put people in danger.
Yeah. Well, Facebook is trying to avoid an antitrust lawsuit and a government censorship lawsuit, which seemed like it was going to come before the coronavirus hit, that Congress was going to step in and do something about the misinformation on social networks. Now, I think that's pretty much been forgotten for the time being, but it may come back.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there was one that I read, one of his tweets that I read this morning that was like, oh, hey, it's great. Georgia's opening back up. And so now there will be places for all of the people with mild COVID-19 symptoms to go on vacation. And I'm just like, oh my God, maybe you should have left that last part out, dude.
That's his whole brand, is he always says the things you shouldn't say, and his people love him for it.
Yeah.
He wasn't a TV star.
I mean, I have family that's like major Trump supporters, and they see this as the most like patriotic freedom fight ever.
Well, I've also noticed that saying sort of outrageous things does wake the students up and make them pay attention, Making yourself bland and dignified is not necessarily the best way to get attention. So I thought this was awesome. I want to try this. This is so simple and so beautiful. Every antivirus software works the same way. It scans your files, it tests them to see if they're malicious, and then it goes back and deletes them. So all you have to do is put a shortcut and change it, and you have a race condition. You can trick your antivirus software into deleting any kind of file. It's so simple, and they all fall for it. And it's actually, they could easily just check for it, scan something, and then when you go to delete it, make sure it's still the same thing it used to be, but they didn't think of that. So this works on every AV and every OS. This is bloody awesome.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So you create a virus,
Yeah.
or something that'll get like an interpreter thing that'll definitely get hit, and then you have it move around the system, creating links where it was.
No, you just make a link to it. So I put a virus in my documents folder. I put a link on my desktop pointing to it. Then I flip the link to point to virus system file, virus system file, virus system file 100 times a second. You can do a simple script. Now, there's a high chance that the antivirus will scan it, detect it, and when they delete it, it'll actually be pointing elsewhere. This is how you do race conditions. It's bloody awesome.
So how do you get it to scan the shortcut before you put the virus there?
Well, if you want to get fancy, you could somehow detect when the scan starts and do it correctly. I just do it sloppy. You just flip it as fast as you can, and you have a chance that the antivirus will nuke it.
Okay.
And then, so you have a chance, like maybe 1/3 of the time, the scan will happen when it's malicious, and the delete will happen when it's not malicious. And then you just put up 3 of them, and one of them will nuke that file. And now you can kill whatever file you want to get rid of, like the configuration file that was stopping their security software, causing the security software to run, blocking your attack. It's bloody awesome.
So you can essentially use the antivirus software to delete the antivirus software. I like that.
And the antivirus all has high privileges to nuke anything, so you can just trick it into killing any file that's in your way. It's bloody awesome. And by the way, if you're smarter, you could probably trick it into writing, because it also writes to a quarantine folder, right? So you might be able to do other things with this. Yeah, I thought that was a great trick.
That definitely opens the door to some ideas.
And it's not reliant on one line bed of code. It's a global concept flaw, a logic flaw, Anyway, and then we've got what? The Pentagon. Ah, yes. You can always trust the Pentagon to do this.
Yes. So surprise, surprise, there are still some security problems.
No.
We're all shocked, I am sure.
Not at the Pentagon.
Everybody hates the Government Accountability Office, especially Trump, but everybody hates them because, here they are calling them out on their BS, and nobody can silence it or shut it down. What they can do is disregard it. All this stuff was, I looked at the report, one of the reports that's linked in here.
They don't even keep track of what they're doing, so you don't even know how bad they are.
All this stuff was stuff they told them to do 5 years ago, and they've done none of it. And most of it's pretty basic, just real basic cybersecurity stuff. And things like cyber awareness training that like most of the government's supposed to be doing anyway. And DOD is kind of blowing them off. They're like, we don't have time for this. We don't need to do it. And it's just like, okay, well, you're going to keep having problems. At least this is something you can do to mitigate some of your wide and gaping holes. Like, I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, I got involved in this, as you know, logistics of their cybersecurity training courses. So now I'm making military cybersecurity training courses until they basically put us on furlough. And, I found just what everyone said. It is so painful to jump through all the hoops that the product is greatly compromised by all the bureaucracy.
Yeah, and I mean, like with this stuff, I got into some of the more granular recommendations, and I'm reading some of this stuff, and I'm like, okay, this was great advice 5 years ago, but things have changed. So it takes so long to get through all the red tape and to even get to the point where you're starting to implement these things, is that some of the original recommendations were obsolete, and they've got to come up with some kind of way to do stuff like this on a shorter time frame. I mean, even on a more local level, like City College suffers from this sort of thing because it takes so long to get through all the many layers of bureaucracy that by the time you actually get to the finish line, the landscape has changed. Yeah. So I mean, it's an age-old problem, but it seems to be getting worse instead of better in our government.
One little piece of it that I see a lot is all the veterans taking my classes where the military is paying for their classes. They all get some computer, which is the worst computer on earth that can't do anything. They come to me with this official Army issue computer and it can't even open a browser. They can't do anything. I don't know where they buy this stuff.
I don't know, but I've seen those too.
Yeah.
And that's all is an adventure.
Right. I've got them now. There's 4 students that can't come to the lab. They're just hosed. They've all got some 3rd generation hand-me-down piece of junk that just can't do anything, and they're trying to make it go.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, I think that a lot of these things, like the cyber awareness training, that's cheap. Yeah. That's a cheap, easy way. That should be a cheap and easy way for them to stop a lot of attacks quickly, but there's nothing cheap, easy, or fast in the government, it seems like.
I mean, the thing that's really frustrating is that when these accountability offices come out and they do these assessments, a lot of it is to get these departments funding, because if they need to upgrade, you need to say, well, why do you need this money? And then you can point to this report saying we're out of date. And so basically what these people are doing is they're saying, here, let me give you the justification so you can get more money, and people still resist it. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, of course, right now, there's a huge pressure from the Trump administration to deny that there are any security problems, because that would suggest that Russia hacked the election and Trump is not legitimate. So he doesn't want to hear anything on the topic.
So yeah, but Trump, I don't think, has that much of a say in, the cybersecurity of like the Pentagon building. I mean, that's a little too below where Trump is.
No, I think he's fired the top military leaders that dared to have a politically incorrect message. I think they're trying real hard to guess what he wants to hear and only say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the reason that Crozier got axed over the coronavirus thing, because what he did was not politically correct.
Yeah, we're very much like the old Soviet Union, where you have a political officer next to the military leader, making sure that all your moves pass the political test.
Yeah, and we want the world to think that we have the bigliest and best and most secure military in the universe.
Well, I think American exceptionalism is really taking a beating, especially with the coronavirus numbers. We seem to be not a leader in almost any way. And our glorious democracy, which is supposed to be so much better than totalitarian governments like China, is not looking that good either.
I mean, to be fair, we are a very large country, with a huge population.
I mean, bigger than China.
But yeah, not bigger than China. But I mean, if you're comparing like the United States to Italy, it's not really a fair comparison.
No, comparing like California to Italy would be more fair.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, and then we got, the people making these reopen domains. This has been all over Twitter.
Yeah. So the first picture that I saw, or not the second picture after Trump's tweets, from the thing in Huntington Beach, I was shaking my head the whole time going, how dare you? Anyway, so Creeps follows, where the heck are these all coming from? And they narrowed it down to 2 brothers who are affiliates with the NRA, and this other person called Michael Murphy.
And they're just doing it to make money.
Right.
Which made sense to me. They're just selling T-shirts and stuff.
Right. this is a total. Hey, this is capitalism. Here's a problem. Here's a solution. Here's give me money.
Yeah.
One of the people who's been buying up the domains, I forget their name, but he's a hippie, and he was buying up all these domains to make sure that the right wingers don't get it. He spent like $4,000 buying up like resist Georgia, or resist Missouri or something. And people noticed that this guy was buying up all these domains, and decided that this person was part of the cabal of people, urging people to break social distancing. But in fact, what this person was doing was just trying to prevent, the bad people from having those domains. But he still got a bunch of hate on social media, and had to turn off his Twitter account and everything. So.
Well, this happens a lot. Like when Microsoft first started getting court orders to take down botnet domains, they took down a bunch of European researchers that had taken over the botnets, because it's hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys.
Right.
Well, and this is actually, first off, total shocker that this rally happened in Orange County. I don't know if you could detect the sarcasm there, but there was some sarcasm there.
Well, they're just finding a market for their product.
Exactly. Second off, this is a huge component of Trump's reelection campaign, because he is definitely leveraging this in such a way that he is making his constituents think that he is like sort of the vanguard leading the movement to repair the economy and get everything back on track. Like the reason that we were so slow to adopt social distancing in the first place was because the notion that this was just a liberal hoax was propagated for so long.
Yeah. Well, this is Trump's thing. He is able to play both sides of an issue. Like he had the right-wingers running over people at the Proud Boys protest, and he was able to throw meat to both sides and say, I'm really the government, but I think they're fine people on the Nazi side too. This is what he does. It's really basically the same thing preachers do. He says something that can make everybody hear what they want to hear. It's working.
Yeah, he's good at it too. He's really good at it.
On that account, I actually saw some good news this week. I was thinking of putting it up there. Biden made 3 times as much as Trump in donations over the last month. He still has a huge backlog of Trump being richer to catch up with, but maybe Biden can do this. I don't know. But I guess that's a much better alternative is to put Biden in there, despite his flaws.
Right.
I think it would be interesting if, because of these protest rallies, it makes you wonder if there's going to be a wave of new infections in 2 weeks.
Oh, absolutely. It's already started happening in Kentucky, and it's going to happen in Georgia. They're opening up. There's just going to be another wave. The way to find that out is just testing large parts of the population, and they have now tested several large areas, and they have found the infection rate is like 4%. And that means you still have 96% of people to infect. So when you resume business as usual, you're just going to have a giant surge of cases. And I hear all the Democratic and left-wing types I listen to say, that'll be the end of Trump. And I say, no, it'll never be the end of Trump.
No.
Just like the Jehovah's Witnesses, you have a group that says the world is going to end next year. Then they say, well, then when it doesn't end, everybody will know you're lying. No, that's not how it works at all. When it's obvious that you're lying, people cling to it more tightly. The more absurd it is, the more they just hide in their inner group and try to pretend everybody else is lying, because then they'd have to admit that they've been a fool all along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the new hot thing is to try and debunk the notion that hospitals are overwhelmed.
Well, they aren't around here, thanks to our social distancing, but
right.
They totally are.
Like New York's a good example. Like these trolls will take pictures of the outside, and because it doesn't look like the Bring Out Your Dead scene from Monty Python, then they say, oh, well, it's all just a big hoax, because where are the bodies in the street?
Well, I heard the smart people when this started like I think basically Gavin Newsom and London Breed, and they said something very good. They said, if this works, then everybody will say you overreacted. That's how it goes.
Yep.
Which I think is fine. But I'm just watching it as an amazing social science experiment. I'm just watching him drive vigorously over this cliff, and his supporters love him, and they'll love him more the more he destroys the place. But the Democrats could outvote Republicans if they would just get out and vote. I think the most important thing we can possibly do is encourage everybody to register and vote.
The insane thing is how many people are using this as an opportunity to push through their own agendas. To me, it was totally nuts that we're not talking more about the constitutional stuff that he's doing in terms of like the Department of Justice initiative to push it through where you can just hold people indefinitely. That's insane to me. Or like pushing through representatives without Senate confirmation. That's nuts, but people aren't talking about those things.
Yeah, well, I think we are in a crisis. Our system is failing in a monstrous degree, and there are two major movements. One is the right wing wants to push in fascism, and the left wing wants to push in socialism. And I think one or the other of those is going to happen.
Cricket.
Right. It's one of those. It's kind of one of those. Like, well, let's see what happens.
We're living through big history. I'm amazed by the news. It's riveting. This history books are going to be written. This is going to be one of those times like the Civil War when everything changes.
Well, and it could. I mean, there have been a couple points where it looked like there could be a breakup, especially with California, Oregon, and Washington forming this like Western alliance, like saying
it's the Western Pac.
Yeah, we're not going
to. And then there's an Eastern Pac and a Midwest Pac.
Yeah.
Well, they can form alliances, but they cannot escape the nation. There's no way out, just like Lincoln pointed out. And the only way to do that is a civil war, and nobody wants that. There's no legal way.
Nobody, Sam?
Texas would be first to say we're out.
I don't think enough people want that. You're right. There are like the survivalists with their shotguns that want that, and there's I guess the ones in Portland, Oregon. There's the ones on the left that want that, the Antifa. But I don't think there's a majority anywhere that wants that.
Wait, and Antifa wants to secede from the United States?
I'm not
going to put it past them.
I think it's a similar group of people that would want to do that. There has always been a bunch of people in California and Oregon and Washington that want to form like a hippie commune and secede from the U.S. I've been hearing that for decades. But
and there's actually right wingers who'd like to kick California out of the union, though I don't think they've considered the financial implications of doing that. But
they tried considering breaking up California in three. Remember?
Yeah, two conservative states and one liberal state, all and then have it all perfect.
Well, that you could actually do legally. You could split California in North California and South California. So that's at least not impossible. But escaping the U.S. is impossible without a monstrous change in the legal structure and probably a war.
Yeah. It's interesting times we live in.
It is.
We'll just throw them avocados. We'll win.
What's that?
We'll just throw them avocados and we'll win.
Yeah. That avocados seem to be the symbol of California.
Well, I mean, right now, I think our wine is more in desire than our avocados.
Well, I'd rather have the avocados. All right.
I mean, really, too, you consider like the port situation because a lot of the international shipping comes through here, and also oil. I mean, I'm like right now right between like two refineries, and there's a lot of them here just in the Bay Area. So I think
it's also a bunch in SoCal by El Segundo and Torrance.
Right. So and they're elsewhere too. I mean, there's some in Indiana. There are a lot in Texas, but I think the bulk of them are here.
So I have talked to right wingers before who thought that California should leave, and they are under the mistaken impression that California does not have farms. So if we were to, go away or do our own thing, that we would basically starve, which I had to.
They've never driven on the 5.
They've never been to California. They don't know we actually do have.
Well, and they're also under the misbegotten notion that because of our social programs that we are the biggest consumers of welfare money, when it's really the opposite. The red states are often the biggest consumers of public funds money, and California is actually brings the highest revenue out of all 50.
Yeah.
But not a lot of our high revenue streams are particularly moral, but that's another discussion.
Right.
Well, there's that. But at least cannabis is an essential item, and you can have it delivered straight to your house. I haven't tried
That's true.
it, but
Yeah, and
America.
with the recent immigration restrictions, I think that there could be there could actually be a couple good sides to this, but I think there's going to be a whole lot of bad. As far as good sides we've known the H-1B system is broken forever, and we're definitely importing a lot of people who are taking jobs that Americans could be doing. And they're essentially driving down the prices that people are getting paid to do those tech jobs. But on the other side of that, I think the farming industry is going to be massively impacted for this. We saw this happen a few years ago in Florida, when everything just ended up like rotting on the trees or vines because there weren't enough people to harvest it. So that's going to be a big issue, both here and nationally, I think.
all right. Any more comments, or shall I stop the recording?
Stop the recording.
All right, I think I will.